there, gang. How are you? Hi, welcome. Just in my sound. Hi there, I'm Christopher.
I'm Angela.
And welcome to the Dinosaur Omelet. Thanks for coming in here, people. Tonight, we are going to be talking about early chick development and a little deeper than just we have baby chicks growing. Welcome in. We are a small homestead here in southern Lancaster County. And this channel, ladies and gentlemen, we try to focus on practical, actionable information. Education, right?
Yeah, that's good information to know for the homestead or self-sufficiency, taking care of poultry, learning skills.
And learning skills. Yes, absolutely. So check out the description of this video down the bottom. There's a ton of good information. There's some links to, what would you call it? Free PDFs and info for you guys on your birds and animals, quails and chicken, how they operate. And the stuff is all written, so it's easy for kids too. Most of it anyway. I try to write family friendly and easy to understand information. So drop something. Figures.
So yeah, this is going to be an interesting talk about the important stages of the life cycle for chicks, developing from hatch throughout each week from there. And Christopher's just getting himself set up over there, and he will be back in just a moment. But yeah, so we will be learning about how important the early development is, and what are important things to consider when chicks are still in their baby stages.
Yeah, sorry about that. I dropped my 30-year-old iPad. Yeah, so you're going to be talking about phase lock biological growth. I'll explain about that. The reason we do these videos, you guys, is most of the audience that we have are homesteaders, people who are doing self-sufficiency projects, and people who are self-starters and learners, and a lot of young families. So we want to bring information to you guys for what we have our expertise in and all of our experience raising these birds. Angela's a very good chicken breeder, quail breeder, and it's not just reproduction of animals. So we are taking data points, measuring things, and trying to keep it as controlled as possible, which is difficult for people at home, keeping very sterile records, because you're not in a laboratory environment. You're working at home, usually by yourself or with a spouse, and so it's not the same kind of controlled level of environment like you have in a giant factory kind of facility where they're very, very strict with their breeding, feeding.
They have lots of data.
Yeah. So they can have predictability and redundancy in their output. Whereas a small homestead, as a breeder at home, it's more difficult, but definitely not impossible to get a predictive output from your breeder program. Is that makes sense?
Yeah, or even if you are replacing, your older chickens or your older quail, and you're just having one bunch of chicks, and you're not gonna, you're gonna have them in the brooder. This still applies to you, because you want to make sure your birds are going to be healthy and highly productive once they're mature. So sometimes we're thinking we can't, it's the brooder stage. It's such a pain, and just want to get through that as quickly as possible. And
it's a pain, but it's necessary.
Yeah, it's necessary to be very aware of their health and well-being while they're in that setting.
Absolutely. So it's getting into everybody's going to order their chicks soon. This is the time of year people start looking at what they're going to be ordering.
Yeah.
And that's why I want to do this video for you guys, because once you get the critters from the mail, it's very important that first early stage care is tended to appropriately, that their needs are met. And we're going to start this in 1 second. I always go by outline. One last thing I want to mention about mail order chickens and chicks. That's a big stressor, and they're young. So hopefully, if you're ordering from, a decent facility.
A stressor on the babies shipping?
On the chicks. Yeah, well, there's a lot of stressors. They're out of their environment, the temperature change, especially this time of year. A lot of places, decent places, aren't going to ship in cold weather, because you get a box of no longer breathing birds.
Well, these days they include these warming packs in there, so they will. But yeah, there's the transport process of being shuffled around.
Yeah, and in the mail, you can have weekend delay.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah, so do be careful when ordering your chicks. Contact the facility you'll be ordering from to make sure they're following an appropriate protocol for the safe delivery of your animals. Okay, cool. Before we begin, ladies and gentlemen, this is informational purposes only. This is not veterinary or medical advice or veterinary instruction for the care of your animals. Do seek professional help. But hopefully this information is of use and value because you guys are trying to do stuff at home, and I highly encourage that. I highly encourage people accomplishing stuff. All right, the chick growth curve illusion, why early decisions permanently limit adult performance. So the core concept behind all of what we're discussing tonight is what's called phase-locked biological growth. Phase-locked. So what's happening in these different stages of life with the chicks and the little hatchlings is if their needs are not met, because these are critical times. They grow very, very rapidly, right? The chicken chicks grow rapidly and the quail chicks grow even faster. So their needs must be met because they're developing in these very rapid phases where their structure is being built, their organs, their reproductive organs and tissues, their digestive systems. All these systems are developing very rapidly right after hatch. And if their needs are not met, environmental, nutritional, etc., you can stifle optimal growth of these different parts of your bird. And that's definitely going to show later in life. And they're phase locked. That phase is now locked into adulthood. So if you have a deficiency in the early stage, you can't undo it by overfeeding them once they're adults. So if you have a small frame bird, you can get them fat, but they're not going to grow and produce new muscle fiber. So the muscle fibers are being produced in youth, and they're not going to come in just because you're feeding them more in their adult stage because their bodies were pretty much developed for their adult growth in those young early stages. Ma'am?
And of course, when Christopher says the adult stage, what he's talking about is once they hit maturity and they're now in their production stage of life. We're not talking about when they're seniors and ready to retire. We're talking about when you want them to be producing your eggs and
or breeding.
Or breeding for sure.
Yeah. I unfortunately I'll interchange words, so I might call them larva too instead of chick.
Very warm and fuzzy sounding.
Okay, so the core concept is that we're dealing with phase-locked biological growth conditions, and these phases need to be attended to appropriately. So key components of early development. I always take notes so I can follow on here because I have this runaway brain. And if you guys have any questions, ask away. This is about care for your chicks or if you're hatching your own or breeding, because the early stage is going to produce what's happening in adulthood, just like with any other kind of creature. You know, if you're not feeding them and they're being malnutritioned, you're going to have whatever the deficiency is going to present as in the adult organism, human, cow, chicken, doesn't matter. That's the formative stage where you're having very rapid cellular division and growth. Okay, cool. So components of early development, skeletal development, osteogenesis. So their skeletal system is developing. We need to, yes?
Did you state the from hatch to when, or you just, I'm sorry, are you saying a summary at the moment?
I'm just going through the early stage brooder growth. And the,
state the, what
hatch
age
to 6 weeks.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, skeletal development, organ, and immune system. And I'm telling you this so you guys keep it in your mind what's actually happening. Their skeleton, their organs, their immune system, digestive tract, muscle and metabolic efficiency, reproductive systems. And we're going to talk a little bit about each of these most likely as we go along. These are some of the components, not all of them. You know, they have brain development and endocrine system development, all these other developments, but they're all developing very rapidly. And we can stifle their growth and impede their optimal growth by limiting the appropriate inputs, appropriate food, and stress. Stress, too, is going to cause deficiency in temperature variation. So we're going to talk about that. Is there anything you'd like to add to that intro?
No, I think that was pretty good.
Okay. So in their early hatch stage, in the first few weeks of hatch, talking about chickens, but again, this also applies to quail and probably ducks as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, probably most poultry.
Most poultry. This is a high energy stage. Their bodies are not going to be regulating temperature very efficiently. That's why they're in a brooder. or out in nature, mommy hen sits on the chicks to keep their body temperature appropriate. Because what's happening in this young age, like we just went over the systems they're developing, their energy is going into the development of these systems. Okay, so they're functioning well and they're healthy and they're robust. And if the organism is freezing because they can't regulate their temperature so well at that young age, the energy goes into that temperature reg and diverts energy away from critical structure production.
But also, if you're looking at a mama hen raising her own chicks, she will, if it's, you know, natural, then she's going to have the capability of hatching chicks during the natural egg laying season without supplemental lighting. So if you're in a region where you have the different seasons and the temperatures get really cold and the sun is less, then during the cold season, then chickens will naturally reduce their laying, not be laying as many eggs. So they're not going to naturally want to hatch chicks. But if it's warmer, spring, summer, early fall, they're going to have the capacity or the instinct to lay and go broody and hatch chicks. And then the outdoor temperature, is more comfortable to chicks anyway because it's warmer. So when you're thinking about a mama hen, she's not always sitting on the eggs, on the chicks that are hatched. She's moving around, pecking, encouraging them to peck and follow her, and they're, leaving her underside, and they're running around too, exposed to the outer temperature. But it's, it should be a comfortable season anyway.
Yes.
But when they get chilly, they go back underneath her, that sort of thing. So the brooder, we will brood chicks anytime during the year, and we have to be very mindful of the temperature, or at least the comfort level of the chicks while they're in the brooder.
Yeah, in the brooder.
Yeah,
absolutely. Like I was saying earlier, the energy for keeping oneself warm is going to really deplete the energy needed for growing healthy. They don't have a mama chick to sit on them.
Right.
So we have the lamps and the heater plates. They do the job. Okay, cool. So what's happening in these first 6 weeks of their growth? So the metabolic energy is directed towards skeletal growth. Now, skeletal growth is important, obviously, because it's going to predict the frame of the bird as it gets older. Something I'm mentioning, too, with these deficiencies is you're going to have an animal respond in adulthood from deficiencies in their chick years. These will be presenting as developmental issues, smaller frame, okay, weakened immune systems, things like this, because of the environment when they were young. But something that does happen in nature is that you have gene expression to deal with the stressor environment they're growing up in. So I always like to use famine. So let's say famine's common. Animals, they don't have food scarcity is quite common. So animals have defense mechanisms for that. We have natural mechanisms for it. But genetically, what's happening isn't the animals aren't mutating their DNA. Their gene expression is different. The DNA tells you how to build a chicken. The genes are saying, hey, this is what you're supposed to do. So you may have gene expression or epigenetics where the chicken, little baby chick, went through starvation period. And so as an adult, it's now, its genes are expressing for starvation. So it's allocating the necessary resources for, energy acquisition, or whatever it's going to be in that environment.
As an adult, it may, even though it may eat a bunch, because during its earlier growth period, if it had a starvation period, this is just an example. As an adult, even though it might be eating a lot, it might not process the nutrients in the foods properly and gain, the necessary weight.
And we discussed that last week, I think, about limiting amino acids.
Oh, yeah.
And the amino acid profile. Yeah, if you have a crude protein, but your amino acids are not appropriate, the animals are not having bioavailability, particularly with the limiting amino acids, of course, they're going to have growth issues because they can't use amino acids if the mix is not appropriate quality, and they're missing the essential amino acids and limiting amino acids.
And for a fast growing animal like poultry in their early weeks, the early days of life within the brooder, starvation period could just be, it could mean a day,
Couple days,
yeah, a day without food, or they ran out of food and they're no food for several hours. It's a stressor on the system.
So if you're going on a vacation or you're leaving for the weekend, you got to make sure somebody's taking care of the little chicks, because a couple of days can make a huge difference later on.
Even a day or several hours.
Especially with the quail.
Yeah.
So that's why nobody ships little quail chicks.
Yeah, they have fast metabolism.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So what was I saying about the gene thing? Oh yeah, one other thing, guys. So subsequent generations may adapt to the starvation or famine period of the parent. But this is not a genetic mutation like at the DNA level. What's happening as the birds are growing, they're going to be smaller frame, they're going to have smaller output, smaller eggs, and their chicks are going to reflect the stature of the bird. It's not a DNA genetic expression, like it's not from the DNA changing and mutating, but it's an like a physical adaptation of the bird. It's a little different. I don't want to get too deep into that. The point of telling you that is this does happen. It can be reversed, so you can have a scrawny little weak generation of animals or 2 generations of animals, but if you're feeding them properly, you can breed them up to normal size again. But nobody practically does that. Like they'll call them or get rid of them or not keep them in a breeding program if they're scrawny from something like this. And it could be genetic where you do have just an animal that's smaller. And
because overall you want to have healthy, robust, strong animals in a breeding program. And using those type of birds as individuals in the program, it can set back the breeder to then have to correct. And of course, there may be some things that are show up for several generations as a result. So
possible.
Yeah.
Hey Alex, how are you? We're talking cool baby chick stuff. How to get them proper. And I'm trying to do too much hard, like deeper sciencey stuff, which nobody really needs. It's not even necessary. But okay, cool thing. So we're talking about the mechanisms and how this is actually happening. So the digestive tract surface area is developing. The little villi, the little, small intestine, all of these structures are developing. But here's an issue. Also, the microbiome is developing. Clean water. So we always say make sure there's food and clean water. What is clean water? We don't want to have soiled water. This presents a problem to the development of their digestive tract and their microbiome that's going to be reflected later in life. What does this mean? So if you're not digesting properly, and human beings have this problem, okay, if you're not digesting properly, you're not absorbing nutrients. You're not getting all the nutrients or breaking, maybe you have an enzymatic problem, enzymes
you could end
doing their
up,
job.
or they may end up with like inflamed.
Well, certainly inflammation can arise from a number of things. It's
from the dirty water.
Oh yeah, of course. Well, that's immediately going to happen. Going to the chick stage, drinking dirty water. Why is this bad for adulthood? Do they just get sick? So because they're developing so rapidly, all right, this is where, like I discussed at the beginning of this thing, it's a phase lock. They're locking in the growth of this system. This system is growing very rapidly, and we want to have it optimal because you can't fix it later because it's going to be built the way it's going to be built depending on the environment it's in. So when you're feeding dirty water to chicks, they're going to start getting overwhelmed with organisms, bacteria, things that shouldn't be in there. So the energy going towards development of that digestive system is all of a sudden going to be diverted to the immune response and fighting off critters in the gut, and they could, that's going to divert attention to optimal or proper growth.
Yeah, and that absolutely will affect how they're able to absorb the nutrients into their body and get dispersed to all the,
It's not, we don't really think of it that intuitively. When you see a dirty bucket of chicken water in a brooder, you're just like, ugh. You're not thinking, oh, this is going to possibly impact them when they're teenage chickens or
what's
adult
happening
chickens.
On a micro level.
Yeah, at the microscopic level. But that's all true stuff. It's cool. And I encourage you guys, like I said, take my word from it. Guy on the internet. Look it up, research it, go to the Googles or whatever it is. There's a bunch of really good academic poultry resources out there that you can actually get qualified info from. I always suggest that, not Facebook.
Yeah.
People on the internet, randos on the internet. I mean, some of the randos on the internet know what they're talking about,
Right.
but you don't know if they're just blabbling or if they're like qualified to speak on that. Okay, cool. Phase 2, week 7 through 14. Efficiency and mass. So muscle fiber is largely fixed during this window of time, with later growth consisting primarily of fiber enlargement. What does that mean? So like a scrawny dude starts lifting and gets all jacked up. He's not putting on new tissue. He's enlarging, stretching out and tearing his muscles and rebuilding them and structuring them larger, becoming bigger. Okay? He's not building the new fibers. And it's the same with the chicken. So the chicken is building all of the muscle fibers and tissues. As he gets older, he eats, becomes a broiler, and he starts growing bigger and bigger. But the fiber's already present. He's not building new ones. And again, that's a good example. Very important for your meat birds that they're fed well as little chicks, because you don't want to waste weeks of your time and effort. I mean, it's a lot of energy to raise these meat birds, and it would be really disheartening to see that you're getting 10 or 15% less due to a error in proper nutrition or environment during the chick stage, which is totally possible. Let's say it's very hard to monitor an outcome of brooder health because, guys, you're not running an experiment. You don't have a control group of 10,000 chicks over here and then another experimental group where you're changing stuff and you can actually measure the difference and take a lot of data. You just have your group. So you're doing the best you can because you're not really measuring. You can measure season to season, but again, it's a whole different stock of hatchery you're dealing with. So it's very hard to monitor that stuff at the homestead level or at the at the personal farm level. The big major farms, yeah, they do that. They take measurements. They're measuring everything all the time because they need a consistent bird, and these birds are specially bred for their diet and their environment and for what they're bred for.
And they're also deliberate in the feed consumption and the cost of the feed that they're feeding them.
Yes, indeed.
Very calculated.
Sorry. The whole thing I was getting at is that this early stage with the muscle fiber development, okay, you're not putting on new tissue. This tissue's there. You're enlarging it as they get bigger and feeding them. But once their frame is built in these young formative weeks, it's locked in place. That's why it's called phase-locked growth. Because once it's there, and you're not going to undo it by some treatment in the future.
Or supplements or something.
Something in the future. Right. Week 15 and onward is reproductive preparation. You always talk about the transition for feed and calcium being inputted and introducing calcium. Now, naturally in the environment, animals are going to look for calcium on their own, instinctively.
If it's available, yeah.
I mean, not like wild creatures.
Oh, yeah.
In their natural ancestral environment, their instinct is to forage for calcium-rich foodstuffs.
Yeah, and a quick note on the first phase that Christopher had mentioned, which was from hatch to 6 weeks old, when they're really focusing on their bone health. That will, if their skeletal system is not grown properly, if they have any kind of if they're small or whatever, that's going to affect their laying ability, because the hens have stored calcium in their, what is the leg
medullary
leg bone. And when calcium that they ingest, maybe it's not provided a day or two or whatever, then they'll naturally pull that supply of calcium from their skeletal system, the specific leg bones.
And they're designed to do that. They have a reserve that they're using. They use it daily. But they're not depleting it. It's always being replaced.
So it's important that their skeletal system is sufficient for that, but also if their form, meaning their skeletal, how their skeleton looks, if it's not proper, if it's smaller than it's supposed to be, if it's maybe more narrow in their their rear end area than it's supposed to, then you're going to end up with small eggs, or even possibly difficulty in laying eggs, or reduction in how many eggs are laid on a regular basis. So the skeletal system, the form, is very important in production of eggs. You're not, if it's smaller, you're definitely not going to get large eggs. It's just, she can't make bigger eggs go out. But yeah, when they hit that reproductive stage, having calcium provided is important because that directly affects eggshells. So, and
the offspring too, because the embryo could be compromised. The embryo could be small. And again, you guys, like, this is not rocket science. You want to make sure the needs are met. What's great is the feeds should be formulated properly. Like, there's grower feeds. They're not producing, nonsense. They put a lot of, because these are big companies, especially if you're buying from one of the box places. Those feeds are sufficient. It's not optimal. You want to give them, like, I guess, chewed up worms and stuff. Like what a mama hen would give in nature. But we don't chew up worms for her.
It does depend on the breed. But yeah, do your research on the food. It's very important.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is the food should be specifically formulated for the chicks to meet their needs, so they stay healthy and happy and grow optimally. Okay, anything else you want to discuss about this? Blah, 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 no, calcium, metabolism? I don't think particularly. We talked about failure modes, like nutritional deficiencies, stress. Stress always. Stress creates inflammation, creates all kinds of problems. You have hormonal communication going on, like your body's going into fight or flight. Survival. So the chick is doing the same thing if they're stressed out, and it's diverting energy from, what do you call it, their immune system and other inflammatory response mechanisms, because they're in stress, so their body can get overwhelmed. Because if they're stressed and then they're drinking dirty water and then it's cold, then you have a whole host of problems. And the dirty water and the cold is causing stress too. It's not just like they got a bad chicken job and they can't stand work. That's how I think of stress. They're just, all of these negative inputs are causing distress on the animal because it's incongruent with their instincts, what they're designed for. Does this make sense? Yeah. All right. So we want to avoid stress. We want to make sure they're getting proper nutrition, so we're avoiding nutritional deficiencies. Water limitation can permanently cap egg size, and we discussed the importance of clean water, but you definitely want to make sure they're getting water all the time. Water is the key to all life. So all those metabolic and chemical processes taking place in the little chicken depend on water. So we don't want them drinking dirty water, and we want to definitely make sure they have enough water. They're not going to overdrink. But do be careful with the placement of the waters, right? So they don't get wet.
Yeah, definitely you don't want them to get wet. So, make sure they're appropriate waters.
So what do? You keep them up high too to keep garbage out of them? You put them on a stand?
Yeah, initially,
they're a little higher off the ground.
When they hatch, it's close to the ground so that it's very easy. You want everything to be as easy as possible for them to locate and reach the food and water. But then as they grow and you're adding bedding to the brooder, it's a good idea to raise up the water, or like set it on something so that they are not kicking their shavings or even getting manure into the water. You want to keep that clean.
Correct, yeah. All right. I think that, because this is a shorter one, I think that just about covers most of the stuff I want to go over here. Okay, core stuff though, I'm going to recap, because this is done. This is a little short. Usually we're here for an hour. Okay, cool. Things I would like to recap here, just to be familiar with this whole phase lock, phase lock growth stage of life. Phase locked. Each phase of their growth, once it's done, it's locked into place through their adulthood. Okay, so that's why we're meeting the chick's needs optimally. Okay, I say optimally because I think, and I use that word a lot, because you want to have it, more doesn't mean better. And I think a lot of the way we think is, if amount 5 is good, then amount 10 must be better. But there's that's not true, because we have toxic thresholds, etc. So you want to have what's optimal. Like there's an optimal amount of sodium in our diet, right? Can't have too much.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes people, will think, oh well, let me just give them supplements or electrolytes or, and people might just like give them that continuously. But that's not good. That's more like a treatment for symptoms that are temporary.
Yeah.
It's not really meant. What isn't meant to meet their growth needs. The growth needs is and the environment, being properly managed and meets their needs, and then the food and water and the heat. But the supplements or vitamins and the water and such, that's just that's like a treatment thing. But it's not going to correct.
If there's a deficiency, yeah.
Yeah, it's not going to correct once they're locked in a phase and they move on to the next. It's not going to correct something, in the way they grew.
So with vitamins and stuff and supplements, and humans do it all the time, we treat it pharmacologically, which means that we're treating it like dose-dependent efficacy models. Like at a certain dose, you're going to have an immediate reaction and betterment. For example, like vitamins. Well, I'm going to take 100 milligrams of vitamin X, but I'm going to up it, and it's going to have a greater dose, and I'm changing this. That's not really how these kind of things work. A lot of the vitamins we're using are catalysts. They're working with the enzymes. It's really complex biochemistry stuff. So you want to make sure the needs are met as best as possible in the natural setting, rather than trying to supplement it and use some pharmacological thinking that doesn't really apply.
Yeah, and sometimes there's a chick gets picked on, and a stress. Sometimes a stressor happens. There's a chick, or maybe a bunch of chicks that end up, their vitamin level goes down, or they're lethargic or something, and they need a symptomatic treatment, temporary. So that's what like supplement kind of thing.
Right. When everything's working fine, homeostasis, everything's going to be in homeostasis, functioning optimally and equilibrium, and we're not going to have problems. And that's what we're trying to avoid, problems in those early stages, so we don't have goofy looking adult chickens. Last thing about that, and I mentioned this earlier, you guys, you have smaller birds or compromised birds from inadequate treatment in the chick stage. So the adults are showing whatever's presenting as their physical defect from the inefficiency in the early stage. It does not mean that you now have a mutated bird, which people think. You may likely have compromised offspring, but this is mechanical. It's because of the build and function of the bird, not because the bird is now mutated and its DNA is changed. I don't want to get too deep into that. It can have, and likely does have, an epigenetic change in youth, meaning that the genes are expressed differently for survival, but it's not changing his DNA, like the instructions on how to build chicken. However, the mechanical body of that bird is compromised, and so its embryos might be smaller, the eggs may be smaller, etc., and it may produce smaller offspring. So I wouldn't say like you've ruined all subsequent generations. But again, like I said, when you guys are breeding, if you have scrawny birds that you didn't feed properly, you avoid breeding them again in the next generation anyway. Mm-hmm. But I think that was an interesting thing. So I just didn't want people to think like, oh no, I have a generation of scrawny birds, now I've ruined their genes. That's not the case. You just change their physical presentation different from what it was bred for optimally.
And maybe sometimes, like somebody who's growing their little chicks for the homestead, they'll see one or two chicks maybe are much smaller than all the rest, and might be thinking, well, why is that? What's going on? And perhaps that one or two chicks were being bullied. They were experiencing some sort of stressor. Maybe they were not able to get to the feed source as easily as the more excitable siblings or hatchmates, and maybe just kind of pushed out from the feeder. Or maybe it's a big group of chicks and they just did more sleeping than they did eating compared to their patchmates. So their physical build is going to be affected. So it could be some sort of stressor affected their intake of the proper amount of food and water, and resting state. And then also sometimes overcrowding, well, not sometimes, overcrowding is bad. So you want to make sure proper amount of space, proper, temperature, and you don't necessarily have to have like a thermostat in there, to be that technical. Just watch their behavior, and they'll tell you if it's warm enough. If they're milling around evenly everywhere, then they're very comfortable. If they're not going near where the light is or the heat source is at all, then it's too warm, around that heat source. If they're huddled underneath of it, and not going away from the heat source, then the space is too cold. So yeah, you watch their behavior.
And all that information is down in the description. Like we have a ton of raising critters PDFs that I put in the description because we could talk about it. Because we did a ton of videos on all these subjects. In fact, go check out the other live videos. Okay, cool. Anything else I'd like to add on this subject? I think this is a good subject.
Yeah, and so sometimes like people like to give their adult chickens like kitchen scraps and stuff as just like extra. But they're already grown. They're already, what they're going to be, their size and their skeletal form and such. Chicks, it's important to make sure no matter the life stage, they're getting the proper nutrition daily that they need.
That's why I don't
with the chicks, especially in that growth rate period, very important that they're getting make sure that the feed you're feeding is a quality source, quality feed that is properly formulated. Sometimes people will, maybe go to like the discount section in the store and, it has a picture of a chick on there and this is good, but maybe it's like really, the ingredients are really bad or it doesn't have very good, the type of proteins and such. It could be a lot of filler ingredients. So it's important to make sure you're getting a trusted brand.
Yeah, maybe I'll do next week or the week after. I'll do a video on what's actually in chicken feed. So when you're reading the ingredients, you know what's happening, how it's being digested, if it's actually of any use. Because a lot of the stuff is just caloric filler with not a lot of nutrients in it, like white bread. It's got a lot of calories. Doesn't do anything.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes people, if you're growing broiler birds, meat birds, oftentimes they'll be on a certain diet from, hatch to certain weeks of age, like 2 weeks or 3 weeks of age. I'm not being strict on that because I don't really remember. And then the protein amount drops a little bit. And they're on like a grower. So they're on a starter and then they're transitioned to a grower because of their life cycle, their phases and how fast they're growing.
Question. When do we do the meat birds to avoid like all the hot fly weather?
We do.
When did we do them last?
We do them early spring. Yeah, we do it like we'll get them late winter, so March, and then they'll be ready to go outdoor. We process them by June, pretty much.
So if you live down south, there's not much you can do. It's always hot. If you live further north, you want to do meat birds, do it in the early spring or late summer where it's going to be cooler. If you can, or it's going to be cooler, especially if you're going to be processing them at home, because pretty gross when it gets hot and you have blood and you have insects.
But even just for their life cycle, they're already running hotter.
They're hot big birds.
And the heat can be really hard on them. So if you're doing it a lot of people end up having to do it in the hot seasons just because of just their life. But make sure you have adequate shelter that's shaded with a cool shade, enough space for them to move around because of they have a lot of manure that they produce. So you don't want them to be in that. It's ideal if they are, either tractored out of the space or you're able to get them, moving.
Yes.
But yeah.
Cool. All right then. I think that just about will suffice. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure as always. I hope you enjoyed hearing some of this stuff. I mean, this is practical information, not nonsense internet stuff. I mean, I like nonsense internet stuff, but I'm not on here much. So when I am here, I want to give you guys useful information to encourage you to learn some things, research the stuff we were yapping about, so you can commit it to your brain. And I think this is actually, so after 45 minutes to an hour when we do these things, my goal is at least one thing is remembered, 1 to 2 things. So I think that whole phase locked biology or phase locked growth stays. So you're cognizant. So you're like, oh, wait, I cannot fix a deficiency present in these chicks when they're older because it is locked into them in their youth at that very rapid growth stage. So that gets locked in and I can't undo it. So if these birds aren't treated right when they're little, they're not going to be the best when they're big. So I think that would be the main thing to remember.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right, guys. Always a pleasure. If you're new here, hit the like button. Yeah, the like button. That's a little thumb up. I like my video. I think it's like I go through the work to get the information here. Like
Yeah,
I would legit click my own video. I'm not trying to sell you on
if
it.
you're encouraged by the information that you hear and you'd like to learn more along with us as we talk about homesteading, self-sufficiency, and poultry types of topics, then yes, subscribe. And we are here pretty much weekly.
Yeah, what is it? I became a chicken expert when this is not my background.
No, it's not your background. But with the corona apocalypse.
So I've been teaching myself chicken stuff for the last 5 years and very intensely for the last at least 3 or 4 years. I've been doing these videos every week. And I've been increasing the depth of the information that I research every week. So the stuff I present to you guys is limited. Like I learn a lot more, but I give you like teachable, understandable stuff, which is fun. I'm not bragging. All I'm saying is when you look into stuff, it's like an hourglass starts building up and you get all this information and then you feel confident in your decisions from what you observe. You're like observing things and you understand. She knows a lot because she interacts with these creatures like Jane Goodall and the chicks. So she's doing like sociological interactions with the chickens at a very intimate personal level, whereas I'm a mad scientist, more or less.
Yeah.
I guess. All right.
So yeah.
Very cool. Time to watch Bob's Burgers.
Have a wonderful evening or day whenever you guys are watching this, if it's later.
And if my new friend Donna shows up, hi. Thanks for showing up.
Thanks so much, yes, for watching. We appreciate it.
And Alex, if you're still here, have a happy night. It was nice seeing you again. And anybody else who stopped in late, I sure do appreciate it. We'll see you.
Bye, everyone.